You're listening to the ADHD Heroes Podcast, a podcast where we speak with the heroes of the ADHD community, namely educators, mental health professionals, and of course, those with ADHD themselves, to gain insights, tools, and most importantly, inspiration towards succeeding and thriving with ADHD. I'm your host, Rabbi Shmuel Reich, a high school Rebbe and an ADHD coach in private practice. Welcome to the show. Hi there. On this week's episode, I spoke with Noa Miller, a registered dietitian who, among other things, encounters ADHD-related challenges both in the realm of nutrition in general, as well as in eating disorders, and has ADHD herself. We began, not intentionally, with a bit of a sensitive topic, that of weight as it pertains to health. She introduced significant nuance to standard assumptions about what is related to dieting versus what may not be a problem or may be a different medical issue and not relevant to nutrition at all. At times, she dropped sound bites that sounded like items of some shock value. As you probably know by now, I don't like to leave things hanging there, so I didn't. I do think, if you hear out my follow-up questions and her responses, she did then clarify what she meant very well. We then discussed why healthy nutrition is important, what the basic pillars of a healthy diet are, the relationship between mental health and nutrition, the unique needs individuals with ADHD may have with regard to nutrition, executive function challenges that affect the ability to prepare meals, the ADHD brain struggling to be aware of when it needs to eat and when it is full, the particular draw of unhealthy foods for those with ADHD, appetite being affected by medication, how coaching can help for many of these challenges, the relationship between ADHD and eating disorders, and a lot more. Quick shout out to the Chinuch Today podcast hosted by former ADHD Heroes podcast guest, Rabbi Yerachmiel Garfield, and on to the episode. Enjoy. Noa Miller, welcome to the ADHD Heroes podcast. I'm excited for our conversation today.
Same. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, thank you. So let's begin with a little bit about yourself and your background.
Sure. So I'm a registered dietitian / nutritionist, and I call myself mostly a dietitian because in most states, anybody can pretty much call themselves a nutritionist. So my job is I help people figure out how to eat well. Because I'm trained in eating disorders, I try hard not to focus on people's weight because weight does not tell us very much about a person's health. So yes, I help people figure out how to eat well. I went through my own health challenges as a young adult, which gave me a lot of personal experience, taught me a lot about health and mental health at a young age. I'm still relatively young, but I do identify as an old person kind of due to my rich life experience. And I guess that's what gives me the confidence to give nutrition advice to people who are a lot older than me. And I love to talk about myself, but I feel like there's too much to say, so less is probably more. Professionally, I worked for many years with Dina Cohn in Lakewood. She's the top eating disorder dietitian there. And since most people with eating disorders have other mental health conditions as well, including ADHD, I did get a lot of experience helping a lot of people with ADHD and beyond. And then one more thing is Dina and I and Batsheva Hertzka, we wrote a book together on nutrition called Smart Cookie. And it's a great resource for anyone who's looking for more nutrition support that is balanced and mental health informed.
That's a great name, too.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's a good...
Thank you. I can't remember who thought of that.
Okay, that's a good one. A good story. You mentioned no connection between weight and health. Would you be able to elaborate on that a little bit? Sounds intriguing.
Yeah, so obviously there is a connection, but it's only one piece of the picture. Weight tells us very little about health. And also, if you think about it, because it's multifactorial, because there's genetics, hormones, there's so many things involved, at the end of the day, weight is hardly in our control. So all we can control is our behaviors, right?
Right.
So that helps us to reduce anxiety and just focus on what is in our control. Like anything else in life, we try our best to do well, get a good mark on the test, but the outcome of what mark we get is not actually up to us. We try to make a living, but the money in our bank account at the end of the day, not directly in our control. Same thing with weight. So we want to take the pressure off, and that actually frees us up to focus on our healthy behaviors.
Got it. What is weight a good indicator of, and what is it not a good indicator of? I feel like it's a little bit loaded, so I gotta like zero in.
Weight is a good indicator of, well, what is it? The gravitational pull on your mass? Like, that's about it.
Right.
And it's not a good indicator of anything else at all. It is loaded. It's absolutely loaded.
I guess what I'm imagining is if somebody is people who overeat are often going to be overweight, and that will probably reflect something, and that often people who are very severely overweight are. I think we're used to the idea that that means that there's some health issue there, but I try to be open to learning new things.
Yeah. So it's a very, very valid question. And yeah, we have a lot of information from the media and diet culture and also from like well-meaning health information and advice of like avoid obesity at all costs. That's, associated with all kinds of terrible health conditions. And it's true, it is associated with those things. Um, but the research, the data doesn't separate between, well, let's look at overweight people who have healthy behaviors and see what their health is like versus overweight people who do not have healthy behaviors. And so it turns out that the healthy the behaviors are much more indicative of what, health outcomes will be. Also, okay, another thing is weight change. So if there's a weight change, right? Maybe somebody is overweight, but they're growing on their growth chart very nicely in their whole life since they were 2 years old till 22. They were or 21 when we age out of the weight charts. They're growing on the 95th percentile. So instead of saying, well, that's overweight, like, they've always been on the 95th percentile. So I don't care to compare them to other skinny people. For their body, that's healthy, right? But if there is a weight change, now that is a red flag. Why is there a weight change? Why are we jumping 2 lines up or down on our growth charts? Yes, we want to investigate and discover what is getting in the way. Is there hormones? Is there a health condition getting in the way here? Are there behaviors that are getting in the way here? More often than not. So do we need to then focus on some behavior coaching, behavior changes in order to support overall health, which includes a healthy weight? Does that make
Got
sense?
it, okay. I think so. Tell me if I'm understanding correctly. It sounds to me like you're saying that if someone is a big person and they always were a big person, so then weight is kind of just a number. They're just a big person. If they have
Yes.
done things that have made them bigger, so those things might be things that are probably are things that are affecting their health. And those are activities or behaviors that need to be addressed. It's not about the number is an indicator, but an indicator of behaviors. If the weight
Exactly.
doesn't come from behaviors, then it's not really the issue per se.
Or it is a medical issue, and that's best addressed, with medication.
Oh God, I mean a medical issue, not a dietary issue.
Exactly.
I got it. Okay, so it sounds like that's also an important distinction. Meaning, when you're saying an issue of weight that is relevant to diet versus an issue of weight that is relevant to some other medical condition, so that issue of weight that's relevant to a medical condition is an indicator that something is unhealthy, but it's not an indicator that the person's not is doing anything wrong or that they need to change anything. It's an indicator that there is a different medical issue. That's not a question for a dietitian or a lifestyle change, but a question for a different area of medicine. You getting that
For
right?
sure. And very often it's like at the end of the day, we want to do the best that we can with our behaviors, even though maybe it's not primarily a behavior issue. It's like, well, this person just lives in a bigger body, but we want to support their confidence and make sure, most people can use that TLC. Most of us can improve our behaviors. So I'm not saying like, not to check in with a dietitian, but I would say, maybe go to an eating disorder dietitian who can make sure to not create more issues, because when we start restrictive dieting, that can actually help people gain weight in the long run and possibly mess them up in terms of mental health. So be careful, get support from somebody that knows about health and mental health. Yeah, I think dietitians are an eating disorder dietitian is a great resource.
Got it. Okay. That was a loaded introduction. We
Yes.
came out swinging there. Okay. So you mentioned nutritionist and dietitian. Are there technical distinctions between the terms nutrition and diet? And if so, what are they?
Yeah, so I would say like they're, pretty much the same, but diet carries the connotation of being like a restrictive way of eating. Um, so a dietitian sounds a little negative, technically. In reality, I don't put people on restrictive diets. I focus on what we can add instead of what we should take away.
Right.
I try to because I find, with the positive psychology, it works better. The best way to change our behaviors is to add positive behaviors that naturally crowd out the negative ones.
Okay. Why is it? It's a very broad question and sort of zooming out a little bit. Why is healthy nutrition or healthy dieting important?
Well, I like to tell people that we need food just like a car needs gas. So, pretty important. We really can't run without it. But even more than that, because we're humans and we're so much more complex than cars, we need all kinds of nutrients to support all kinds of systems. And like I said before, there's very little in our control. But one thing we can control is our behaviors. So, and then we trust that healthy behaviors will support overall health. And that includes a healthy weight for your body. That healthy weight might not look like what you may have dreamed of. But your body knows how to regulate itself. And we need to just relax and let go of, stress about the health outcomes and stress about the weight outcomes and what we want to look like. Because again, those are not directly in our control. I would say one more thing that nutrition is also excellent preventative medicine. It's much more limited as actual medicine once you have like a disease in progress. So it's something very worthwhile to invest in.
I mean, taking care of ourselves in the first place is a lot of is the ounce of prevention rather than the 100 ounces of cure.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Got it. What are some of the basic pillars of a standard healthy diet?
So I would say eating 4 to 6 times a day. So like call them meals, 3 meals and 2 to 3 snacks. We want to eat about every like 2 to 4 hours. Don't go 5 hours without more than 5 hours without eating. In terms of the balance, what's on our plate, we want to have the 3 food groups with meals. So source of protein, source of carbs, vegetable or fruit. And then with snacks, 2 food groups instead of one. So add in a source of protein, a source of fruit or vegetables to our snacks. And then when it comes to how much should we be eating, we want to really listen in to our hunger and fullness cues. We were born knowing how much to eat. And more than that, I would say we need to trust our hunger. Instead of just listening to it, we might listen and say, oh, you know what? I feel hungry, but I'm busy anyway. So how about I just skip lunch? And probably that's a good thing because maybe I'll lose weight. So no, we need to trust our hunger, that our hunger is important in order to potentially listen to it and that it's valid. Our bodies do better at maintaining a healthy weight when we eat earlier rather than later. So there is kind of this misconception about that eating less is better. No, we need to eat enough and we need to eat in a balanced way in order to support ourselves.
Got it. So intermittent fasting. You a fan or not such a fan?
I'm not a fan just because like it doesn't work for me. Like I don't like to eat that way. Like I'm not a robot. So like there's research that it's helpful, but I feel like maybe can I say that maybe it's more helpful for men? Like I don't know. Um
Right.
or like when there's less emotional involvement. Like I'm, you know, so
There's a place for it, you're saying?
I'm I'm
There
saying
can be a place
if
for
it
it, but you're
works
not.
for someone,
Right.
if it doesn't bother them, like okay, like it can be healthy, but if that feels restrictive, don't do it.
Right. Got it. And any particular foods in general that people should pay extra attention to either make sure to incorporate or try to limit if possible?
In general, fruits and vegetables, many of us can use more of those. Whole grains, lean proteins, although I don't really like that word because healthy fat is also healthy. So, like, let's say, full fat dairy is really wonderful. We even have research that it can be helpful for people who are trying to lose weight. So, it's not necessarily about having less fat. So, healthy fats, proteins, fruits and vegetables, whole grains, I guess, to answer your question. And omega 3, healthy fat, omega 3. Most of us can use more fish oil. Omega 3 is really, really wonderful for everything, for cholesterol, for cardiovascular health, anxiety and depression, dry eyes. Omega 3 is like, I'm not obsessed with supplements. I think we need to get most of our nutrition from a healthy diet, but omega 3 is something that most of us can benefit from, as well as vitamin D.
What are good sources of those omega 3s in fish, right?
Fish, but I was even talking to someone today, like with fish allergies, and my own son has fish allergies. So that we can get omega 3 from algae oil. Also, so there are supplements like made from algae. I don't know about a kosher one, but maybe a vegan one. Have to research that more. There is actually there is whatever. There is a kids one that I know of. I can't remember. We also get omega 3 from different seeds.
Okay, before we dive into ADHD in particular, you touched on this a little bit before, but if you could elaborate a little more, what's the relationship between healthy nutrition and mental health?
Yeah, so there's a lot. Mental health impacts nutrition in all different ways. I guess I'll start with, let's say, mental health having an effect on nutrition. So, and then I'll flip it. And how does nutrition affect mental health? Um, so, let's say anxiety and OCD, those are huge root causes of eating disorders, specifically the restrictive type of eating disorders, anorexia and ARFID, trauma as well. Trauma creates eating disorders. And if you're not sure what is an eating disorder, I think we'll talk about that, but also disordered eating, like when your eating is just not working well. Trauma creates issues with nutrition. Depression causes poor eating, can cause poor eating due to a lack of motivation to eat well, and also seeking comfort in less healthy foods. Um, and you might be listening and saying, oh, well, I don't have any of these diagnoses. And thank God, I'm happy for you, although they are very common. But one thing that does affect us all is nervous system regulation. So when our nervous system is in a relaxed state, or our parasympathetic nervous system is going, I like to call that the rest and digest state, that calm um, that calm state helps us to digest our food. It also helps us to develop an appetite. And so on the flip side, when we are in fight or flight, we do not develop an appetite, and we may even get nauseous. We may even get nauseous if we already eat food. And so if we're in this go, go, go mode, we're not going to be able to eat well, probably because we're not going to notice that we're hungry. And that's not going to help. So sometimes we want to focus on techniques to calm us down in order for us to succeed at our nutrition. And then, so that's kind of looking at the mental health, how that impacts nutrition, and then flipping it and saying, how does nutrition impact mental health? I would say that overall, it's not rocket science. Eating a balanced diet is going to be supportive of mental health because it's supportive of our whole bodies. And how are our brains supposed to function if they're not fed adequately? So we need basic macronutrients, protein, carbohydrates, fats, in order to support overall mental health. In terms of micronutrients, the small nutrients, vitamins and minerals, in particular, vitamin D, omega 3, B vitamins are linked more to mental health. Vitamin D helps produce serotonin. Omega 3 helps with everything, like I said, including anxiety and depression. Antioxidants um, also help combat stress. vitamins E, C, and selenium have antioxidants, and also think of like colorful blueberries full of antioxidants. So those can help as well.
Kind of. So if someone's not eating well, what might that look like in their mental health? Like practically, what might be like a sign to somebody that like, oh, maybe I should be eating better?
So if they're confused and overwhelmed and tired, or maybe they have a headache, very often it's like, oh, am I eating properly? Um, there's like in the moment that I'm thinking of like that afternoon droop where like, did I eat lunch? Or we're reaching for a coffee and it's like, oh, maybe I actually need some food and hydration. And then there's like kind of long term, like chronic fatigue syndrome. Like, why is that happening? So being very tired and brain fog. It's like maybe my nutrition needs some TLC.
Okay, swinging it over to ADHD. So what are some standard awarenesses that someone with ADHD should have that they should pay more attention to with regard to their nutrition?
So there are a few areas that can use a little more TLC for people with ADHD because with ADHD, there are gaps in, firstly, executive functioning. So that gets in the way of planning, shopping, preparing, and serving food, just the basics of managing with food, especially like, think of the primary food provider, like mother. That's a lot to ask of. Then something else with ADHD is that ADHD is associated with poor interoceptive awareness, which means that interoceptive awareness is like being able to listen into your body. So let's say like hunger and fullness, noticing those, processing those feelings. So people with ADHD are less likely to notice their hunger. That's even without deciding, oh, should I actually eat? What am I going to eat? Are they noticing hunger? And then processing their fullness in order to stop eating. And many people have issues both on the under eating end and then the overeating end because they undereat and then they're extra hungry. So then they overeat. So they'll go many hours without food and then they're starving. And then they'll finally, when they eat, they're eating a lot. And they're both these issues are linked to the same thing of not listening to their body. I feel like there's so much to say on that. That also people with ADHD seek highly palatable foods that are loaded with sugar and fat
Right.
because their brains are wired to seek that immediate high intensity reward, that dopamine hit. So that's a challenge. And also another thing is it's harder to put the brakes on in ADHD. There's more impulsivity.
Yes.
So the prefrontal cortex that helps us make decisions is less active in those with ADHD, and it also can't compete with the excitement from those highly palatable foods with sugar and fat. So the combination makes it really hard for someone with ADHD who sees chocolate or a Danish. They're hungry. It's lunchtime, but they see that chocolate. They're going for the chocolate and Danish instead of taking the time to make themselves a healthy, balanced meal quite often. And this is all without medications. So then you have stimulant medications, which cause appetite loss, and that gets in the way for so many people as well. So there's a lot of potential issues with nutrition for people with ADHD to be aware of, that they're not crazy, they're not lazy, it's just, they have a lot of things stacked against them. And, a lot of people could really use nutrition support.
Gosh, that's a very important point. In addition to the informational piece, you're saying that there's going to be shame and guilt around any sort of mess up, and one thing we can very easily do for them out of the gate is let them know this is harder for them than for their counterparts. So yes, we should do something about it, and we'll be getting there shortly. But also, they don't need to feel so badly about it. It's an important
Absolutely.
piece. Okay, any difference between adults and kids in this regard? I guess kids have more chocolate sitting under their nose sometimes, or
You know
maybe
what?
not.
Interesting. I learned that Children are wired more to seek sugar because they're growing. So it's something that naturally wears off as they get older. So it's not something we need to freak out about. It's normal. It's for a healthy reason. Of course, we want to try to maximize their nutrition and maybe limit, like they're not, shouldn't have sweets available all the time, but we want to be normal. But another thing is that kids are at a greater disadvantage when it comes to like decision making because their prefrontal cortex is less developed. And that's why parents are in charge of what's on the menu. And it's not up to a kid to decide what's for supper because who knows what they would put on the menu. But adults have different disadvantages, like being very busy, having a lot of extra responsibility, like with work and taking care of other people. So sometimes it's simpler to be a kid and maybe they're just freer to listen to their body and eat when they need to eat. So I'm thinking of like the coffee culture, like for adults, like, oh, just like keep going, get through. And then maybe they'll eat tons of supper and be eating snacks late into the evening because they pushed off their eating the whole day in order to be productive.
I mean, kids have a more formal, lunchtime or whatever in
Yes.
school or camp.
Yes.
God, okay, so we have a lot to unpack. Okay, what can we do? How can we help people? Maybe let's take them apart one at a time. So maybe on the executive function side of things, how can we help them there?
So I think one-on-one coaching, behavioral coaching, like we need, doesn't have to be a dietitian. I think a dietitian is great, but it's not rocket science. Like we need to take the time to break down the behaviors and strategize, maybe put timers in place, create systems for shopping, food prep, packing, getting support. Like, I'm thinking of like my female clients who are overwhelmed with like all the food shopping and preparation necessary. Like, they do really well when their husbands or another family member can take responsibility for a certain area of that and just take that load off of them. So that's kind of getting around it. But sometimes it's like we need to arrange our lives so that they work so that we can have a chance at being successful. Sometimes it's just too much. Sometimes we're holding on to too much.
So that's a lot of the skill side of things, which shameless plug is what I do. My email, as always, is in the show notes.
Yes.
What are other things you recommend?
So, one thing I love to work on with people is nervous system regulation, especially for someone who's on a stimulant. That, well, it's a good thing because it's stimulating their prefrontal cortex to be able to make better decisions, but also that's getting them revved up in like the fight or flight kind of mode. Um, and we need to combat that in order to help them like develop more of an appetite and be successful with their eating. So taking 3 deep breaths or singing or humming, um, these are things that help, in it. I help people figure out, okay, what are we putting on the menu? And then also what relaxation piece are we doing? Like we need to get ourselves regulated in order to succeed.
Can that be an indication that their dose is too high? That the dosage of their medication is too high, or not necessarily?
Yes, but it's a complicated um, topic because very often the dose is too high for certain things, but not enough for other things. So it's that
Oh, got it.
pull on both sides. And I'm very pro like the microdosing, like taking. I find that even for myself, I'm taking like a low dose of a stimulant could actually really make a difference, and then you help curb the side effects. So absolutely, playing with the dosage, playing with the medication, um, is always worthwhile. Don't settle for like, oh, this is what my psychiatrist gave me and whatever. You want to follow up and try to tweak things and report what issues you're having.
Got it. As far as the issue of the suppressed appetite, what do you recommend for that?
So, okay, so nutritionally, so I recommend focusing on fats, frequency, and fluids, 3 F's. If you have a poor appetite, you want to It's easier to get your nutrition through fluids, maybe make smoothies and milkshakes, or have like a cup of juice or chocolate milk next to your meal. I'm thinking, kid friendly um, things. So, fluids, frequency, eat every 2 hours. Try to have something small. Put on timers so you don't go too long. And
Is that hard with no appetite? Meaning that if they're not hungry like a adult, you can tough it out, but as a kid, they're like you just don't want to. How do we navigate that?
well, it's 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 something important. It's like, well, you don't want to go to the bathroom either, but it's kind of like your body needs to go. So it's not really a choice if a kid needs to grow, right? Like often like the doctors sending them in to see a dietitian because they're not growing well. Or maybe they're even losing weight. That's not okay.
Right.
So it's food is their medicine. This is what's important for them. Now, can the psychiatrist adjust medications to help support the nutrition when nutrition is not working out? Absolutely. We need to look at the whole picture and collaborate, have all the professionals collaborate. But
Okay.
but yeah, it's just something annoying that they have to do. I wish food could be interesting to them and we could just go with their appetite and hunger and fullness, but very often we cannot trust their fullness. When in someone that has a poor appetite, no, we don't trust their fullness. Of course you're full. Of course you don't want to eat. You're on a stimulant, but we do trust your hunger, and we also trust that your body still needs a certain amount of food in the day, and we're going to divide that up and we're going to have a plan, and we'll try to eat every 2 hours. We'll try to put yummy things in, but not everything are you going to like, and that's life. We sometimes have to do hard things.
Got it. So it sounds like you have to turn it into a routine where they're not trusting their instincts per se. They're trusting their instincts if they're yes hungry, but if they're not hungry, don't trust those instincts and manage anyway, which is
Absolutely.
hard to do, but it's part of what we do. I always tell clients that you have certain times you trust your instincts, especially the things you're good at. A lot of my clients are fun, social, good at sports, and their instincts are golden. And then when it comes to time management and other areas of executive function, they have to learn to not trust their instincts, which is a very difficult thing to do, but it's part of the work. So you're saying we'd have to apply the same idea in the context of their appetite. I'm getting that right?
Absolutely.
Are there foods in particular for the that are better or worse for the ADHD brain that individuals with ADHD need to be aware of, getting more of or less of?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So I would say our needs are the same as humans with or without ADHD. We have the same needs. And there is no ADHD diet that is, proven to help people reduce symptoms of ADHD. There is a lot of misinformation out there that people eat up because they're so desperate to fix the problem. So if you're trying to get your kids' behavior under control and you're told that cutting out sugar and artificial dyes is going to make a huge difference, you might do that. With dyes, some people are sensitive with or without ADHD. Certain artificial dyes can have a small, measurable increase in hyperactivity temporarily. But to me, it has nothing to do with an ADHD diagnosis. It's like just separate. Like you need to address ADHD. Don't go avoiding medication. Like, okay, I'm gonna take the natural route. It's not a route. It's like maybe some people are sensitive to dyes and might, get a little hyper after eating those artificial dyes. If someone is presenting with ADHD, they are diagnosed with ADHD, we need to address that like medically or behaviorally. And cutting out dyes, you may or may not decide to do that, whether or not you think the person is actually sensitive, or, maybe not cut them out, but reduce them. Another food is um, some preservatives. Well, not a food. So certain chemical preservatives also have like a minor negative behavioral effect in some trials, like sodium benzoate. And again, it's regardless of ADHD. So I am not pro. Like, I'm not someone who's going to say, oh, come to me, I'll help cure your ADHD naturally. Absolutely not.
But it just sounds like if someone is already having a hard time with hyperactivity and they're sensitive to these foods, so that might compound the challenges. Am I getting that right?
Yes, it's something you can be aware of, but um, don't go overboard on it. It's a very small temporary effect in some individuals.
Got it. And when people speak of the importance of protein in their diet, that's for everybody.
Yes.
Is that more true in the context of ADHD per se, or just a thing that everybody needs?
No, that's a really good question. So it's everybody. And I meant to say, like, the main thing is that we need to just have a regular healthy diet. Like, a lack of food is going to make ADHD symptoms worse. Because our brains are not supported when we don't have food, whether or not we have ADHD. So there's going to be that breakdown. So eating well is important, especially for someone with ADHD, because there's some things stacked against them.
Got it. I mean, this is, so the same way everyone needs to take care of their body, and if they don't take care of their body, it's not going to function as well. So if someone already has certain things that are impaired, those impairments will be triggered a little more, exacerbated a little more if they're not in great shape. Is that right?
Yes.
Um, okay. What is the relationship between coffee and ADHD?
Okay. Well, I will say that personally, coffee helped direct me towards diagnosis and treatment of my ADHD as an adult, which I think is
Ooh, tell me more.
interesting.
Eh,
So I think it was like 3 years ago that I started drinking coffee. It was like, oh, some people do this and it helps them. Let me try. I was not, thriving in the morning. And as I started drinking coffee, it really changed my life. And then at some point, well, I had symptoms of inattentive ADHD since childhood. Was thinking more and more about it for like 10 years. And and that was just one thing to add to the pile of, like, okay, that built up till I got myself um, assessed and diagnosed. Was like, if coffee is so good for me, coffee is a stimulant, maybe I can use more stimulants. Stimulants treat people with ADHD, so maybe there's something to that. Um,
whoa.
and many people will self-medicate, I think, with coffee,
Sure.
without knowing it. And the issue with that is it has a short half-life, so you're gonna get this, like, spike and crash more. And there are stimulant medications that are much more effective at giving, more long-term, support, more, what's the word, like, balanced.
Right. Is there a difference between coffee with sugar and coffee without sugar in that regard? You mentioned the spike.
Yeah, I don't have an issue with some added sugar. So you're putting in a little bit of milk. Coffee is not a major source of nutrition. There's a little bit of milk and a little bit of sugar, maybe. So you have a little bit of protein, fat, and carbs. It's kind of balanced. Um, but if you're hungry, don't drink coffee. You can drink a coffee with something else, but first tell yourself, okay, I'm going to get some food and then I'm going to have my coffee, and you can have it together. But don't just settle for a coffee. So I'm not against coffee with sugar. I probably prefer that over artificial sweeteners, unless somebody has, even for somebody with diabetes, they don't have to cut out sugar. It's about having consistent carbohydrates, consistent sources of sugar.
Got it. So, if I'm understanding correctly, it sounds like someone needs to be on top of their ADHD in general. Coffee can be helpful in the context of other things, in the context of healthy dieting and everything else. It shouldn't be something to lean on per se, but if they're using it once in a while and it's beneficial, that's fine. That works.
Yeah, there's no reason to avoid caffeine if you're an adult and you have ADHD, but it's definitely not for kids, because we don't know the long-term effects of caffeine on kids' health or growth.
Really? How come? I feel like caffeine's been around long enough that like somebody should have figured
Yeah.
that out.
I don't know, but no mothers let their kids have coffee. I don't know.
Right. When I was a kid, they used to say it stunts your growth, but everyone I knew who drank coffee as a kid is 6'2".
Mm. Yeah, so it might not have any effect, but I guess we don't know. And it's one of those things that they're probably not gonna do much research on because that sounds, like, risky, like, that sounds like, what's the word? Like, not, ethical because what if there's negative effect, and then you're gonna potentially stunt the kid's growth. So I think it's like a theory, and we don't actually know because nobody's doing the studies because it's not ethical.
God, the downside of kids not drinking coffee is very minimal, I guess.
Nice.
Okay.
Some kvetching.
Well, yeah, exactly. Okay, swinging it over to eating disorders in general. What is an eating disorder?
Okay. So, an eating disorder is a disorder in someone's eating. So, to explain more, it's a disordered relationship with food or body that causes significant restriction or, on the flip side, overeating. So, there's anorexia, anorexia nervosa, which is restricting too much. There's bulimia, which is overeating and then restricting to compensate. Then there's binge eating disorder, which is just eating out of control. And then there's ARFID, avoidant restrictive food intake disorder, which is kind of like anorexia, but without the body image piece. So with anorexia, I didn't mention that there's also like the body image issue, the like dissatisfaction with a person's body that causes them to go and restrict to try to shrink themselves. So ARFID is like is the under eating, but without the body image issue. Something about eating disorders is that they're egocentric. They take over one's identity. So like people identify with their eating disorder and they don't realize that it's a sickness. And something else about eating disorders is that they're biopsychosocial disorders. So, yes, it's a mental health condition, but it's also there's a biological predisposition, or maybe it's triggered by something biological. And then social, psychosocial. It's a social disorder built on diet culture. When we walk around and we think it's healthy to go on a diet and uh, shrink our bodies, and that's a good thing. We're setting up the stage for people to develop eating disorders. So a certain percentage of people who go on diets will then go on, that will trigger an eating disorder in someone that is at risk for an eating disorder. So just another shout out to that restrictive mentality, that diet culture that so many of us don't even realize is an issue. We take it for granted. Oh, of course, it's synonymous with health. But no, restricting and having external food rules, that's not a healthy thing. We want to trust our own bodies and be able to eat in a balanced way, eat a variety of foods in a balanced way.
Are individuals with ADHD more likely than others to have or develop an eating disorder?
Yes, interestingly, individuals with ADHD are like 3 to 4 times more likely to develop binge eating disorder, bulimia, and ARFID. This is probably due to impulsivity. And then they might overeat, and then they may or may not compensate for that overeating.
Oh, got
Like,
it.
that would be bulimia. And then ARFID might be due to poor appetite from ADHD medication.
They can develop RFID just from the medication?
It can be a trigger for sure. People can develop ARFID from getting braces on, and then their teeth are hurting, so then they don't eat. It can be a trigger, yeah.
Right. Does that RFID have anything to do with dislike for certain foods because of their texture or whatever?
Yes, yes, it can be like that sensory piece.
And in that case, they're limiting not quantitative eating per se, but it plays out that way because there's so many foods they don't eat. Am I getting that right?
Yes, so they might have only a few foods that they are accepting, and or they might be accepting more foods but they're not eating enough overall, or a combination of both those factors.
Got it. And what are the standard treatments for those?
So CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, and FBT, family-based therapy, those are the gold standards, I would say, depending on the type of eating disorder.
What's family-based therapy?
Family-based therapy is when parents basically take over control of the food. It's like, okay, food is not working out for you, teenager who is restricting terribly, so we're going to take over that responsibility. And you basically are force feeding the kids, or maybe only psychologically force feeding them, or kind of sometimes physically. But it's very effective because you're forcing them, but it's very difficult on the parents, and it can be very traumatic for the kids. So it's not like, obviously you should try to give them uh, their autonomy first. I think an eating disorder dietitian is a great place to start, because an eating disorder dietitian will help figure out some goals for them and then assess, can they meet those goals? Can we continue this kind of nutrition therapy, or do they need to switch to family based therapy? And so then the dietitian will recommend for that, or sometimes they'll go straight to a higher level of care, higher level of like intensive outpatient or inpatient eating disorder care if family based therapy is not going to be ideal because of the family relationships or something.
How do teenagers react to that? I don't picture that going over so well.
Yeah, it's really messy. I would never want to do such a thing. However, it has its place. Like, the younger, the better. So if it's like an adolescent, if it's someone like 12, 13 years old, it'll probably work better than someone 15, 16. So it really depends on the age, depends on the relationship. Sometimes it can be super effective in just nipping the eating disorder, and this is not okay, and we're not doing this anymore. And you kind of force the kids into that food exposure that they're so terrified of. And once you force them through it, and then it reduces their anxiety. So when done correctly, there's some excellent family-based therapists out there, and it can be great. I just think that an eating disorder dietitian should be first line. And and some doctors tend to want to send directly to FBT because there's so much evidence for FBT. And with nutrition therapy, there's less evidence for it because it's not one specific modality that we have done a lot of research on. So we just don't have like the evidence for it, but anecdotally can be really effective to see an eating disorder dietitian. And then of course we refer um, out when it's not working.
Got it. It sounds like um, FET can be a little drastic. I'm getting that right?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, absolutely.
Is there anything they do to get the kids on board? It sounds like a little scary to me.
Maybe give them a lot of rewards, like they can go on a exciting vacation or get some exciting Segway or who knows what.
Got it. Okay. The I guess the same way we try to get kids to do things that they don't want to do and make a plan.
Yeah.
Okay. How does ADHD in particular interfere with this process?
So impulsivity, um, the impulsivity that created the eating disorder maybe will also get in the way of treatment.
Right.
So sometimes we need to get someone diagnosed or treated for ADHD in order for them to succeed at their eating disorder recovery. Sometimes we need to consider changing their medications to a non-stimulant medication um, to support better appetite. On the other hand, that's for someone who's restricting. On the other hand, for someone with binge eating disorder, one stimulant, Vyvanse, is actually approved to help people with binge eating disorder by reducing appetite and
Right.
also
Interesting.
helping them make better choices. Yeah. And yeah, we help them with the hand holding and that nutrition therapy, nutrition coaching. A lot of my job is not medical nutrition therapy, not so clinical. It's helping people break down the behaviors and succeed in changing them.
Got it. What does that look like?
So we'll figure out what's getting in the way of them. Oh, you didn't you didn't meet your goal that we talked about last week. Okay, what got on the way of that? Were there certain thoughts, emotions, environmental factors? We can do like a behavior chain analysis and figure out something that we didn't realize was getting in the way, and then we can strategize on how to combat that.
Okay, as we start to wrap it up, what is a message of hope you can leave our listeners with?
I would say we were born knowing how to eat. We are not broken. What gets in the way is all the stuff that piles up on our shoulders as an adult, maybe even as a kid, but especially as an adult. Um, and when we take the time to organize our food life and clean up some of our habits, it's really always possible to improve.
Okay, great. And how can people get in touch with you?
My email, nourishedwithnoa@gmail.com, is a great way. My website is nourishedwithnoa.com.
Okay, great. We'll have I'll put those in the show notes. And anything else you wanted to mention today?
I would say our bodies are relying on us. We need to be our own friend, take care of ourselves like our own child sometimes. Sometimes we really do much better taking care of other people than ourselves. And sometimes we need to adjust our work-life balance, work less, eat and exercise better, adjust the big picture items to support ourselves.
Got it. Okay, Noa Miller, thank you so much for coming. This was an amazing conversation.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you again for listening to this episode of the ADHD Heroes podcast. For questions about the podcast, you can email us at adhdheroespodcast@gmail.com. Also, for sponsorships or to share your story, your ADHD story, you can also email us at the same place, adhdheroespodcast@gmail.com. To be in touch with me about ADHD coaching, writing, or speaking engagements, you can email me at rsreichadhdcoach@gmail.com. Be sure to check out my website, rsreich.com, adhdcoach.com. You can follow me on LinkedIn, or you can check out my blog on nefesh.org. Check out my blog there under my name. Important disclaimer: podcasts are great, but they do not take the place of mental health help or medical help. So if you need help with mental health or need a doctor, be sure to be in contact with some of them. Please, if you like this show, please rate, review, and share with a friend. That's how these things get out there. Thank you again for listening, and thank you to our producers at Pretty Easy Podcasts.